Tuesday, October 7th, 2025 at 1:14 p.m. Eastern Time. Um, doing a solo show, and I think I need to do a show about being grateful. I just got back from the gym. I normally meditate when I come back from the gym and then kind of mess around. I literally just got back from I just walked in the door, filled up my cup of ice, and sat down. Um, and I think I need to be grateful for where my show is and where my life is. So this is less of a soul rant, more of an exercise and squashing my ego. Um, whenever at every point during the life of the podcast, I always hope for it to be farther than it is, which I feel is pretty normal in all endeavors. Um, but the podcast is something where the energy I put into it is not on par with any other long-term endeavor in my life, and in a good way. Like I started lifting weights and when I was in seventh grade, I think. My dad had a Bowflex. That was 2003, maybe 2002. And I remember so I was just like, I want to be buff by high school. And I was kind of there after 2 years. By the end of high school, I was jacked. I was like, this is awesome. My freshman year of college, I messed around a lot. Not a lot. It was functionally retarded. Um, Sophomore year, I kind of kicked it into high gear and studied nonstop for 6 semesters and got into med school. And I'd always be upset that my GPA wasn't higher and that I was pulling the weight of my freshman year. Um, but I would just keep putting the work in and then it would come back. So going to the gym, you'd put in 1 unit of work and you get two, or you get 1 unit out. Studying, you put in 1 unit of work, you get a unit out. Um, After college, obviously, lost my older brother and then kind of spiraled for a couple of years and moved home with my parents and tried a bunch of different stuff. Tried writing. I wanted to do comedy. I wanted to do like video shorts. I wanted to write for The Onion. And I did all those things. And again, those were all 1 unit in, 1 unit out. And you can see some of the Photoshop stuff on canvases around my apartment. Um, and then what I found with the podcast though is the podcast is almost like a fusion reactor. I get more out than I put in. Like I put in a lot, as anyone that watches this knows. You don't have to, take my word for it. You can go back and just look at the number of episodes, the duration of each episode, the timestamp, and you can fill in the blanks and go, you did this many in this many years. So, you know, um, but it's always been something where more comes out of it than I put in. And if I'm someone who's shown myself over the years that I'm willing to do the work in weightlifting or the work to get into med school or the work to teach myself Photoshop. You don't really see the Photoshop thing because obviously it wasn't broadcasted on the internet. But not as I've been doing the podcast for almost 6 years, but Photoshop almost 5 years, just countless hours teaching myself. And so, I'm willing to do the work as I've shown myself. But the podcast is the only thing where I get more out than I've ever put in. And I put a lot in. Um, Maybe it's not 2x that comes out. Maybe it's 1.1, 1.2x, but it's always succeeded more than other endeavors that I've used brute force against. And I mean, I have several of these endeavors in my life where, that's just what I dedicated my life to. You guys can see the podcast one, and I think if you know anything about the show or have seen it grow, you can probably take my word for it. Like, okay, yeah, well, you put your mind to something and do something, as does everyone. Everybody's a hard worker. But I'm kind of lucky at 35 to have several of these blocks in my life. Like 5, 6 years nonstop weightlifting, 4 years nonstop studying, 5 years nonstop Photoshop, 6 years nonstop podcasting. And the podcast has always brought more back than I've put in. Um, and wherever I am on the show, I'm never quite happy. Like doing the podcast started December 2019 and was doing it over my parents' garage in Maryland. I had moved home from Georgia. Really, and not really. I had no friends. I had nothing. I had not nothing. I have loving parents. But and I was working at like a liquor store, and that job sucked. And I was just doing this, on an iMac, or not an iMac, a MacBook, screen recording it. I think some of those stools are actually the same ones. I just stack stools all around it. Stools, old tripods, like a broom, and I just kind of made a wall, and then I ordered the cheapest moving blankets I could on Amazon and draped it over it for it to have sound buffer. My point is I've always wanted it to be farther. And right around the time I kind of start to like hit the threshold of monetization on YouTube, that's when COVID rolled out, the election, and they're like, yeah, no. Um, and then obviously I had the investor that helped me along, which was a godsend. Like I still can't believe that happened. For people that don't know, it's a dude that watched my show and reached out to me, and we became buddies. And he was basically like, I think you've got it. And just like an angel investor, and was like, I'll give you this much to get it off its feet. And that was just a blessing that I still can't fully wrap my head around how that happened. Um, I moved out in April 2021, and just, obviously, right, just nonstop work. I got banned from YouTube in August 2021, and that was like the biggest gut punch ever. I built up to 5,000 something subscribers. Um, and I was so proud of it. I think I had like 300,000 views and 32,000 view hours and 545 episodes. And I was so proud of it. And when I got kicked off to Rumble, I was so devastated and depressed. Um, and then obviously just, kept at it. And the show's grown exponentially on Rumble. It's now up to 51, 52,000 subscribers. It's got almost 18 million views. It's 1,850 something episodes. And then, eventually get back. Well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. We get back on YouTube. But as this thing grew, to, I was forced to find irregular and unorthodox means to fund the show. Now, I know that sounds like a passive admission of like human trafficking. No, but that probably would have done it. But no, it was just, okay, the first question, you Google anything, it's always like, so you're going to want to get on YouTube, or you want to get on iTunes, you're going to share on Facebook and stuff and try to build a following. And it's like, well, I'm banned from YouTube, I'm banned from iTunes, and I'm banned from Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat. Okay. And I really hated that I was banned because part of me just wanted to have fun on the podcast. I just wanted to goof around, be outright pure fun, and maybe throw in conspiracies. I never, in a trillion years, had any desire to make it into some sort of, I don't know, moral rich, ethically important spearhead tool. Never. I never. Yeah, I wish I could say that was my dream from the beginning, was to just do the right thing, but it wasn't. I just wanted to make money and, get my own apartment. And obviously, got started to have on all these doctors in 2020. I think a lot of people retroactively kind of project, go, oh, well, you have a biology major, you got into med school. This was clearly near and dear to your heart. No, it wasn't. I didn't give a fuck. It meant nothing to me. It was a curiosity. And it's not just me and some bro talking about how this is a dangerous vaccine. I was like, yeah, I'm reaching out to these doctors, and they're all saying they've never seen anything like this. And then I'd be like, well, maybe that's just a fluke. So I'd, go up and find I don't know, like a higher ranked doctor, or a doctor with more degrees, or a higher position in whatever institution. And just moving up and finally getting in touch with like Dr. McCullough and Dr. Malone. Dr. Malone holding the patents to the mRNA vaccine, and Dr. McCullough, the most published cardiologist in world history, talking to them both kind of separately. And them like talking to me, like we've never met before. Oh, it's not recording, but they're just kind of talking. They're like, I've never seen anything like this. And I was like, oh God. and obviously started doing those shows, and then you know knowingly got it banned. You don't just get outright banned. You get strike one, strike two, strike three. No, you get warning one, warning two, warning three, strike one, can't upload for a week, strike two, can't upload for 2 weeks, strike three, you're out. And had it been anything else, and again, I'd like to say that I'm, a warrior for free speech, but I'm just being brutally honest. Had they said stop talking about UFOs, I absolutely would have done that because I didn't care. My logic would be I'll stop talking about UFOs, get monetized on YouTube, build up the channel as much as I can. Years down the road, I'll start talking about UFOs. And if they tell me I can't, I'll be like, whatever. I've already built up an audience and I'll leave. But UFOs aren't like that near and dear to me. Like I get free speech, but UFOs weren't something like wrapped around my heart. Um, I felt I had to do it with this because it just felt so unequivocally evil. And it didn't matter if I couldn't explain, why is this falling on my lap? Like when I had Dr. Malone on, I had less than 1,000 subscribers on Rumble, not even YouTube, on Rumble. And I just was like, all right, we'll do it. And so this is all the whatever, and then ran the course and got banned. And it's forced me to find ways of, like Patreon. Patreon will let me get paid. They won't let me upload. Like, all right. And, you know, uh, local, some people pay through there, some people cash apps, whatever. And then even on Rumble, it was early on, the ad revenue was awful. I mean, awful. Like $10 maybe a month, maybe. Actually, I think for the first couple of years, I don't think I broke $1 total revenue. Um, and then I would get very angry that it wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I remember in April 2022, roughly a year, about almost exactly a year after I moved out of my parents, 2 years, 5 months since I started the podcast, I just remember being like the angriest I had ever been that the podcast wasn't working. I felt I was owed. I felt that I'd been doing the right thing and that my life would be so much easier if I was just talking about Kim Kardashian's ass on YouTube. And was very angry that like why did this moral thing have to come across my lap? Like why can't I have an easier one? Don't talk about UFOs, or whatever. Like why does it have to be this thing? And going through that, and but I was super super angry. And I remember at like a certain point I had to stop and go like it's already taken me farther than I ever could have dreamed. It was my dream to like move out of my parents' house. That was the dream. Like it didn't go past that. That was the dream. And I moved out, and it's like, and you have all the stuff you never thought you'd, because I used to daydream all the time about, the studio I'd make, the sound panels and the camera and the microphone and the iMac. I had it all, like, I had an Amazon wish list, ready to go for like 2 years. It was like one day, like, if it ever works, I'll do all that. Like, it would be so crazy to, like, not live with my parents, because I lived with my parents from 25 to 30. I'd be like, it'd be so crazy to like not have to work at the liquor store and to like have a studio in my own apartment where I can set the thermostat to whatever I want. Those dreams you have when you're 18, I was having at 30, almost 31. And then, so when I was really angry in April 2022, I had to look around and go, dude, this is so much more than you ever thought it would amount to. And I really had to do that. And that's kind of the crux of this entire solo rant was like, look around you. There's some quote where it's like, "Oh, silly me. Here I am, surrounded by all the goals I once thought were dreams, and I'm not appreciating it." And I really had to think about that. And it would make me think of, and I just was thinking of it last night, but like a parable I probably haven't heard in 20 years. I never knew what it meant to sing to the Lord a new song. But I looked it up and it's sing a new grateful praise, not just for the things you have, but things that you haven't been thankful for before. And you'd have those waves of gratitude and then you just keep working or whatever. And, I always dreamed one day I was going to have a gaming stream where I could hang out with my friends and we could capture that. And then, like, that became a thing. And very quickly, I just accepted it as the norm. Um, and then, one day I had a dream. I was like, when I make enough money, I'm going to leave this because my apartment in Maryland was off the side of a highway. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was very cheap. And I remember thinking, like, all right, well, how could this get better? I want my own room as a studio, not just one in my own apartment. Because the one in my apartment was just half my bedroom. My bed was on the other side of the computer. And then I started thinking, like, what would it be like to move up to New England and be like close to family for the first time in 20 years? And I would kind of joke, I'd be like, yeah, I mean, I don't know how that's gonna happen. I don't know how you're gonna swing that. And then one by one, these things would happen where I moved up to be closer to family. And then I got a two-bedroom apartment to where I could, put the studio in the other room. And all these things would just kind of keep going. And even the old studio, I don't know why my voice is raspy. Even the old studio with the blue lights, like that was a dream I had had where I was like, well, what would Studio 2.0 look like? And it was like I allowed myself to dream. Because like when I had that moment of gratefulness to sing to the Lord a new song in April 2022, I was really grateful for what was all around me. I'm like, you used to dream about moving out of your parents' place. And then so once I became grateful for that, I decided I was like, you have to kind of like dare to dream again. And I would get like nervous thinking about, well, how much better could it get? My own room for the studio, put the blue lights up and make it some weird techno whatever. And, you know, like, and then be closer to family. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's my wish list, Santa. Like, good luck. And then over the course of like the next year, I kind of just found myself there. My own studio in its own room, close to my family. Like, wow. Um, and I'd be like, all right, I want the podcast to break 10,000 subscribers. That's all I want. I just want the big 10,000 because that means you're serious. And like one day I passed it and then just didn't really pay attention to it for another year or two. 16,000, 20,000. And it would take a moment to kind of stop and be like, you did the thing and you're not even grateful for it. And there'd be times where I'd be doing the video game stream and we'd be playing like whatever Sandstorm Insurgency or Ready or Not, and just shooting people and just laughing until we couldn't see straight. And I have these moments of like consciousness where it was like I'm sitting at this gaming computer, laughing my ass off. My friends are on Discord and we're capturing the whole thing. And then that's earning ad revenue. Granted, it was nothing, but it was like this is more than you ever could have dreamed of. Um, and then as it kept going, it was also like, one thing I kind of dreamed of was like, I wish I had the willpower to just like stop overeating and stop drinking and stop. I wish I didn't have to medicate myself. And it's no one's responsibility but my own. Um, and then obviously I, checked myself into an inpatient facility in January 2024 to wean off of gabapentin, which I guess isn't even supposed to be addictive, but it, somehow, my luck. And a month or two out of there, I would already forget, like, hey man, you survived that thing. Like, you're not in a good place if you willfully check yourself into a psych ward where they take all the sharp objects for 10 days. And very quickly, within a month or two of getting out, I was already just like not grateful for it. And I would always have to go back and go, okay, we'll have to be grateful for it. Um, so that was like January, February 2024. And then as it moved closer to April 2024, so, you know, when I met my investor in fall 2020, it's basically like, hey, I'll essentially pay your rent and your bills, food and rent for, a single dude for 3 years to get the show off the ground. In return, I own a percentage. It's like, hell yeah. Um, and as that was kind of coming to a close, um, in April 2024, I'd randomly done a show like a month prior with Joe Altman. Never heard of him before. I don't even know how I got him on my show. It was I have so many guests, like sometimes I don't even remember. I'm like, did I ask them or did they ask me? I don't even remember. But I remember I had him on and we just hit it off. And and I think he was talking to me after. He was like, how do you like what do you do running the show? Like how do you get it going? And I kind of gave him the whole spiel about the investor and I was like, yeah, it runs out April 17th, 2024. And I was freaking out about that, but I had some savings put aside and I was like, all right, well, you know, I'm still not making anything on Rumble. I'm barely making anything on Spreaker and Spotify and Anchor and PayPal, Cash App, or pick your poison. I was like, but I have this amount of savings. I could probably run the show for like another year, which you got to understand an extra year tacked on to a multi-year endeavor, especially like the podcast. It's not the same as adding one more year because it's growing exponential. So in that last year, you might make more progress than the first 5 years combined. And that was my logic very early on was like to save. So on April 17th, 2020, no, sorry, April 15th, the 10th anniversary of my brother's suicide, Holman reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to like come on Frank's speech, like Michael Lindell's thing? Like, we'll pay you a flat rate of like this. And it was like barely enough to pay my bills, but I was like, oh my God, yes. And I just remember like crying when I found that out because it was on the 10-year anniversary of my brother's suicide, April 15th. And then 2 days later was the day that my contract ran out with my investor. Basically, I get no more checks in the mail. And I couldn't wrap my head around like what were the odds of that happening. And so obviously went on Frank's speech last April and went through April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And then I was also kind of convinced that nothing mattered with the podcast because I really thought we were just sliding to civil war. I really did. I was like, part of me is like, what's the point of even doing this? Like, it's clear this country's about to fly apart. Um, and obviously it hasn't. And then this past February, very unofficially, and I don't mean it because, the dude's been nothing but great to me, but I was let go from Frank's speech, I think with several other content creators, and I still don't know the details of it. It is what it is. I still like and respect Mike Lindell, but like no heads up. I mean, like I was at the gym on the treadmill and found out from the tread by the time I got off the treadmill to the time I came back up here, I was no longer with them. And I remember like not imploding. I just remember thinking like this sucks. I need to take a shower. I have a show today. I need to go to bed early. Focus. It's like the meme of I don't even know what movie it is. Is it Pirates of the Caribbean or Master and Commander where the dude's walking in slow motion and the ship is exploding all around him? That's kind of how it felt when I was let go from Frank's speech. Now, in the past, when the shit was exploding all around me, I was also exploding, you know, getting banned from YouTube or, um, yeah, getting banned from all the social media platforms and, having panic attacks and being far away from family and existential crises and, blah, blah, blah. And I would always detonate with the explosion. And I remember like the big one was coming in April of 2024 when I was about to run out of investment. Now I had enough money to run the show for about a year. That would have been till April 2025. And I absolutely would have had an explosion if I didn't get picked up by Frank's speech. Now I would have survived it, but that was not an example of me learning how to not explode. That was the explosion was negated by an external force. So it's kind of like rehab. It's the best case scenario is you having the willpower to put down the pill. The next best case scenario is going to an inpatient place where they take it from you. They're not the same though. They're both good. Progress is great. They're not the same though. One of them is an immense amount of willpower. The other is it's still some willpower to go check yourself in, but it's being taken from you. So the quote unquote explosion that I avoided in April 2024, um, what was that? Um, it wasn't that I had like learned how to overcome explosions. It was that it was negated. Okay, that's cool. I guess maybe you could argue in some weird way I negated it by working hard and having it, whatever. I don't think so. I think it was taken, the explosion was taken from around me. And then this past February, uh, getting let it go from Frank's speech, that was the first time I ever didn't explode with the explosion. And there was an explosion. It wasn't negated or called off. There was an explosion. And I mean, I just remember coming, I'm just being like, it's almost like the kind of humming when your hearing gets shot, just like the shell shock kind of like, ooh. I just remember thinking like, I am not in a position to mentally explode. I have to do a podcast. I gotta take a shower. I gotta get up in the morning. And like the next day, I was, still not comfortable, but I was like, I just gotta keep one foot after the other. And then slowly, Altman created Untamed, and that brought me on board. And I was like, oh my God, like we're going again. And you know, even just that, where it was like it felt like the show was ending in February. It really did because I was let go from Frank's speech, and at the same time, I did not realize how good the election was for Rumble channels. Because it's not even like Rumble booted me or something. My average income was was going around $500 a month throughout 2023, 2024. Now 2024 is low, that's 2023. $500 a month, 2024. To after the election, it dropped to I think like 30 or $40, like over a 90% drop. Same on Spotify, 400 to 500 a month, dropped down to like 30, like 30. Um, the entire, Frank speech paycheck was gone, which was like 90% of my paycheck. And then I had also my time with my sponsors, Heaven's Harvest and Blue Room had run out, but I had told them that if they had helped me through that year, which I had contacted them before I knew about Frank's speech, I was like, I will advertise you for life. And, and I'm sticking to my words. Some people are like, are you still sponsored by Heaven's Harvest? I'm like, no, but I did promise that I would do it forever, so I'm going to do it forever. Same with Blue Room. Um, but yeah, everything came down. So I don't know, making five grand a month in February, maybe six, and it went down to under $90. And it wasn't a one-off. It was, well, it's still on Frank's speech, but it was that way in December and January. It was also that way in February, March, but I was also let go of Frank's speech. And I just remember thinking like I had this moment of, I just had this moment of like, it's like it's not working. And I have like an indomitable, was it indomitable human spirit of just like singular focus on one goal and focus and drive to that goal until you are dead or everyone in your way is dead and just go. And I remember just kind of going like, wow, it's not what the fuck. Um, and I had wished it would be working by then. And then very quickly, picked up by, Untamed. So then, by March, I was making a good portion of my paycheck again. Not the same, but a portion, maybe like 70%. Um, and then in like April, May, Spotify view, Spotify income started to go back up and stabilize. And then Rumble Studio, the creator program, will pay you, monthly. You have to hit the thresholds, whatever, 30 streamed hours, 5 ad reads, whatever, 5,000 view hour, whatever, the whole thing. And slowly but surely, my entire net income pretty much came back. I think it's still slightly less than it was, but it's completely come back. And over the years of doing this podcast, I always look back and go, it's very clear, God was guiding you. You have to put in the work. What's the quote? God will guide the boat, but you gotta row. You gotta put in the work. You gotta break your back. But it was such a non-linear, unintuitive path. I think one of the, not I think I know one of the reasons I wanted to be a doctor was because there was a path from the base to the summit. You got to take these courses, you got to get these grades, and you got to beat out this percentile of your class. Difficult, just like climbing Mount Everest is difficult, but it's been done and you can do it. It's not impossible. You might die, but you can do it. This is not that at all. There was no ride to the summit. This entire thing has been like surfing a landslide. Like you don't meet people who are like, yeah, so you're gonna come up to that first hurdle. That's when you get banned from a big platform. It's not somewhere people can, every person 35 could give some advice to a teenager. Have you had your first heartbreak yet? Are you in puppy love? Have you snuck out? Have you stolen mom and dad's liquor? Have you driven around? You smoke pot? All these things. That doesn't exist with this. There's no Sherpa. There's no sensei. And again, it's fine because I'm owed nothing by anybody. But to continually get through it and to do it with honor and pride and to stand up for what I believe in and, despite I lost almost all my friends during COVID. Um, and I look back at it and it's God was so clearly guiding me each way. I think, oh, what was his name? Michael. Oh, he's this guy I had on a couple of years ago. He's such a great author. Michael something. His wife came on and she had written a book, like a children's book, and she and I were talking about it. And I remember her telling me it was Christmas 2022. And she was saying, like, you don't know how it's going to work because if you did, you'd be doing it. It's not med school. It's not pre-med where it's like you're upset that you don't have, the completed grade of OChem on your report card or your transcript, but you haven't taken the class yet. So, of course you're not going to have that bargaining chip on there. You got to take it first. So they always tell you like take cellular biology before the MCAT. You want a good grade on that course when you go and apply to med school. And I remember she was saying, going out and building your own way is a lot like almost like a steampunk bridge. It's just like almost Transformers. You almost just imagine all these gears and planks just straightening out in front of you as you walk off a cliff. If you knew that was there, it wouldn't be scary and the risk wouldn't be the risk and everyone would do it. But it's building out in front of you. It's, and and she was like, you don't know how it's gonna work because it's the whole Rumsfeld thing, known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. If you knew how it was gonna work, this wouldn't be the risk. You could argue, be like, well, I know quote unquote how to get into med school. Doesn't mean it's not risky. Yeah, but no. You just got to get the grades on the courses. Well, what if I don't get them? Get them. That means no social life, no more friends. That's what it means. But you can do it. Every year, thousands of people get into med school across the United States. Like you can do it. It's just difficult. This is not that at all. Um, it has not been anything close to that. And in hindsight, it's like a Somebody said Rube Goldberg device. It's like want to Google it. If you were to like look at it at the end, it would all make sense. You go, yeah, that's where it hit this, and then the frying pan, lit the oven, and then the steam popped the balloon, and that forced the Hot Wheel down the whatever. And it's easy to look back and go, that was a wild ride. But there have been multiple times over the course of this podcast, um, where I have, ironically, both looked back in time at the duration and the life of the podcast, um, and looked at it and went, "There's no way that ever could have been planned." And those were some scary speed bumps, but the Lord guided you. I will look at that and go, "That is true," and then immediately turn and look at my current situation and go, "But this one's different. This one is so much worse. I don't see how you're gonna wiggle out of this." And then that whole thing passes and another 6 months goes by and you go, man, God was really guiding you. You know, you met this person which led to that, to do this, to this, to that, to whatever. You go, it's true. And remember when you thought that that one thing was different, all the other previous ones were, a given, but yeah, that one was scary, but it turned out well. You go, well, it did turn out well, didn't it? You go, yeah. And then without a second thought, you turn and go, but this new situation, I don't see you getting out of it, man. And then that itself starts to repeat that phenomena of looking back at the terror and making sense of it, and then saying, but this new terror cannot make any sense without any pause, without any second thought, to then look at a new thing and go, but I don't know how you get through this. And then even the Frank speech one, I just remember thinking like, oh, like that is never, there's never been more evidence of God looking over me. Just the dates that it happened, the amount of time I had left on a 3-year contract. It happened in the last 48 hours of a 3-year contract. And then just forgetting how grateful it is. And I don't know, maybe this past February, the Frank speech thing was maybe the first time I did try. And I wouldn't say trust it because that's retroactively projecting a value onto it, which I wasn't doing at the time. But in a sense, I was through my actions by going, I'm not going to freak out in a way that's almost an implied trust in the majesty of the unfolding. Um, and then sure enough, without going through all the panic attacks, it worked out. And it's almost like you've been on the roller coaster long enough, you realize like, yeah, the loops are fast and they're scary, but they're gonna happen and then you're gonna be fine. So it's already stressful enough. Why don't you remove all the self-inflicted panic attacks? You're making it so much worse than it has to be. To be like, oh, you have to study calculus. And that sucks. But then you go and sit outside and study it during July with no sunblock on. You'd be like, hey man, calculus already sucks. You don't need to be doing it and get a sunburn. What are you doing? Um, and so, even now I'm just really I wanted the podcast to be so much further. I want it to be doing so much better. I want to have more stable ground underneath it. Because even now, it's paying the bills, but none of these are contracts. None of these are, a 12-month guaranteed if you show up and do X minimum. And if we let you go, we'll give you a severance. And then as you get let go, you start looking for other jobs. Because it's not even like, all right, well, I was an accountant and I have a guaranteed salary. And if they let me go, I have severance pay. And I can go in that time, I can go find another accounting firm. That's not what this is. There's not, you go do another podcast, which again, I'm not putting that out there like, woe is me. It's my own decision to do this and no one owes me anything. Um, but yeah, I thought by now it would be much farther along. Um, I thought I wouldn't be, I used to think about what would it be like to get money. And it was all this like heady euphoria, kind of like, oh, I want, whatever, this computer and I want to get this Lamborghini. And now when I think about it, I go, man, I would just really like to know that, I have a year of my living expenses taken care of if I'm willing to work. Like that's my dream now. And yeah, I guess selfishly, I thought it would be a lot farther along by now. And maybe it is far along, and I'm just not being grateful enough for it. Um, but yeah, you just find that anger, that anxiety, the depression, the sense of entitlement, the narcissism, all these are all aspects of it that I just thought it would be so much farther along by now. I thought I'd have a little more of a cushion, you know. What happens if you get dropped by Spotify tomorrow? Like, don't worry, I can pay the bills for the next 2 years and find out a way to get a new, revenue stream on the show. I guess I just thought I would have had that by now. And I don't know, it just wears on you, dude. Like I'm 35, just to be very honest. I don't have a social life. I don't really have any life. I don't go out. I don't drink or smoke. I have no love life. I have no friends I meet in the physical world. All I do is work, and the work itself is exhausting. And it's, again, all these are all my issues. I'm not putting them out there as, but it's also like, I don't want to be like fighting with a knife in my mouth for the rest of my life. Like, I don't want to get, a little more money just so I can be, okay, the podcast is alive for a couple more years. Like, I want to live a life that's not just spreadsheets about podcast analytics. And yeah, I just figured the show would have made a lot more money by now, and it wouldn't need to be so full throttle, redlining the engine every single day. I'd have a little more breathing room. Maybe I would only need to do 4 shows a week or 3 shows a week. And I could kind of put myself out there and, have a life. And I think what I need to do is be extremely grateful for how far it's come. I'm back on YouTube, making money on Rumble and Spotify and Untamed. I'm losing weight. I've been sober a year and a half. I live in New England near family again. Like all things I should be so grateful for. And instead of being grateful for them, I'm sitting here angry that it's not more. And I don't really know how to make sense of that. I mean, I know what I need to do. I need to be grateful, but I guess that's the $1 trillion question is how to be grateful and how to trust that it's going to work. And despite everything I've said in this episode, I still have a horrible feeling that right now, this is a new hurdle that I will never overcome. That up until now, it's all been luck. God has been watching out for you, but now he's abandoned you. He said, yeah, no, never mind. And it's scary because it does feel that way. And I'm not going into like personal about like what it is I'm talking about, but like, yeah, it's a bit of a curveball just thinking it would be at X and it's not at X. And I think I can bitch and moan and cry about it, or I can just be grateful. And that doesn't mean be complacent and say, oh, it's good enough. Not at all. What it does mean is like, hey, we're not in civil war. Your podcast is paying the bills. Doesn't need an external investor. That's pretty cool. You're sober almost 2 years. That's very cool. Congrats. I used to have panic attacks once a week. Now I have them, I don't know. I have anxiety a lot, but full blown panic, I don't know, once a year. Yeah, I used to have a bad night's sleep twice a week. Now it's like once a month. It's there is so much around me that I should just be so grateful for. And I should not be so full of fear that the podcast isn't going to work or something. And I should just be grateful for how far it's come and how far it's got me. And yeah, so instead of moaning and saying, woe is me, I think I need to tell myself it's going to work out. It's worked out thus far. And to be grateful for what you have and be grateful to have God's light. So that's kind of how I feel right now. Not great, but I think I need to be grateful. So with that, I love you guys. Thanks for watching.